Welcome everyone to the 541st Council meeting of Canterbury Regional Council. I just want to acknowledge that we're still in a worldwide pandemic around COVID-19 and we're facing Omicron at the moment, and we are therefore doing these meetings online at home, hopefully for not too much longer, because as one councillor said to me this morning, there's something to be gained and we don't fully understand it, but about being in a room with other people and actually having humans really there with you when you make decisions and when you interact and when you do your daily work. That changes your persona and how you feel about the world. So we just need to acknowledge that this keeping on doing it online isn't really good for anybody, and it's not really how humans should be. So we're still in the red traffic light system. And for those who are Irish, I'll acknowledge that it's St Patrick's Day today, which of course brings back different memories for different people. And for those of us with Irish heritage that's really close, it's often not the best of memories. But it is good to celebrate being Irish and indeed celebrate any heritage that you might have, because we need to remember where we've come from. So now I'd like to just say that we'll operate as we normally do, and I think we're all pretty used to having our meetings online, so we don't need to be reminded about any of that. I'd like to invite Councillor Craig Pauling to offer a mihi. Thank you very much, Craig.
Whakaronga aki au ki te tangi ata manu e rere runga rawa e tui ia. Tui ai runga, tui ai raro, tui a te herenga tangata, ka rongo ta ao, ka rongo te pō tihei mauri ora. Ka huri au taku whakaro ki ngā tini aitua kua wehi atu ki te pō. E nā mati, ui a whānau, ui a marae, ui a takiwa, haere, haere, pari atura. Pari ki Hawaii ki nui, Hawaii ki roa, Hawaii ki pāmamau, e nā mate, moi mai, oki mai. Āpiti hono, tātou hono, rātou ki a rātou, te honga mati. Āpiti hono, tātou ki a tātou, te honga ora, anō reira tēnā koutou. A tēnā koutou I runga I tā hauatanga o te rā. Ai, e noho haumaru tonu mātou. Ai, nau mai hara mai ki tēnei hui o te kaunihera Taiao ki Waitaha. Kei a koutou nā ringa raupa, nā kai kaunihera. E nā memo o te hāpori e mātaki mai. Tēnā koutou. He mihi nui huki mō te rā whakanui o Hato Patariki, ki nā hoa, ki nā rangatero o Airana, tēnā koutou. Ka hoa atu te rākau ki a Councillor Marshall mō te Karakia Timatanga o tātou nei hui. Kia ora, Councillor Marshall.
Kia ora. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina te uta, ki mā taratara ki tai. E he aki ana te atakura, he tio, he hoka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora.
Oh, thank you very much, Councillor Pauling, and thank you very much, Councillor Marshall. We're moving on to apologies. We have an apologies today from Councillor Tane Apanui, Councillor Grant Edge and Councillor Megan Hands. I don't believe there's any other apologies. Moving on to conflict of interest, we haven't been advised of any different or any changes to the current conflict of interest registered by councillors, which is online. Public forums, deputations and petitions. We don't have any for this meeting. We're now turning to extraordinary and urgent business. We don't have any of that, and neither do we have any notices of motion. Now we're moving on to page 6 of our agenda, on which you'll find the minutes of the meeting of the 16th of February. And I'll ask if there's any changes to those minutes required. I don't believe there is any changes. And Councillor Phil Clearwater, are you moving that resolution or?
Jenny, can I just I think you moved the apologies. Just want to make sure that we confirm them somehow, perhaps simply. Appreciate
I don't know, do we normally have a resolution around that? Christina, do we normally have a resolution around apologies?
No, we don't.
I'll call.
Okay, that's all right then.
That's
so
fine.
Thank you very much. No trouble. Thanks for drawing that to my attention. That's great. Moving on then to page 6 of the agenda. We're on to those minutes of the 16th of February. If there's no errors or changes or questions that people have got, I'll move from the chair that those be confirmed. Would you like to second that, Councillor Peter Scott?
Yes, I will.
Okay, it's seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. I'll adopt the practice that John Sunkel has introduced. So I'll take it that everybody's in favour unless you raise your hand to say you're against. So all those in favour, now I'll turn to all those against, please raise your hand. That's carried. Thank you very much. We're now moving to page 18 of the agenda. That's the unconfirmed minutes of the 24th of February meeting. Have we got any issues or questions with those minutes? I don't believe so. So I'll move it from the chair.
Seconded.
Seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. Once again, I'll say if there's anybody against carrying those minutes, please raise your hand. There not being anybody raising their hand, I'll declare that carried. Thank you very much. Now we're moving to item 8.1. It's on page 22 of your agenda. Just making it known that it's much easier if the chair says the page numbers, because it's pretty big scroll through when you're doing this online. And I'll hand over to our CE, Stephanie Rexeter, to actually speak to this report. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the report as read. I'm going to focus on just a few items within that. There were 3 public fora and 1 petition to report back on. And in particular, councillors, I'm looking at pages 23 and 24 of your papers. In the first instance, there was Ms. Sarah Vanderbirch, who spoke to council regarding the increasing bike ridership from Littleton to Christchurch. We have responded to her, and in particular, we provided the analysis that was undertaken with regard to the cycle rack usage from Littleton side of the tunnel. And that showed that there is sufficient bike rack availability at this time on the buses departing Littleton. We've also been doing the service review of routes 17 and 28, which is an improvement in service going from a 30-minute frequency to a 15-minute frequency. And in addition to that, of course, there's the addition of 3 slot cycle racks with regard to the multimodal connectivity. And between those 2, that should further increase the availability for those who wish to travel. Ms. Vanderbirch also raised the issue of reduced fares for cyclists. And as councillors will be aware, there are some fare change options in our annual plan, and she was encouraged to engage with our annual plan. Further, we had Mr. Stephen Howard and Ms. Dot Lovell-Smith from Keep Our Assets Canterbury, and they spoke with regard to the running of public transport locally and nationally. We did provide them in our response a copy of our submission to the Ministry of Transport with regard to their public transport operating model, often referred to as PTOM. They also raised concerns regarding the condition of older buses, and we provided them with information about how we manage that in terms of the suppliers addressing them, but we absolutely encourage our customers to report any concerns as and when they see them, because we want to be on top of them immediately. And similarly for these 2, Stephen and Dot, what we did with regard to bus fares was encourage them to contribute to our annual plan submissions process. On the Cycle to Work scheme, Mr. Robin Barraclough spoke to council with regard to that scheme, which is quite focused on a salary sacrifice, but a national scheme. It would need to be led nationally, and we're still investigating that in terms of how we can better respond and encourage advocacy, and I'll come back to council on that. As Council is aware, there was a petition, and Councillor Phil Clearwater, on behalf of the Cass Bay community, tabled that position, and we are providing further feedback, and obviously we will be utilising that in both the annual plan considerations and further engagement processes. Chair, that's my summary for the CE's report today. I'll hand back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was an excellent report. And as I've heard from people who've made submissions, they're very happy with the responses we're giving. So I want to publicly thank staff and the CE for all the work that's put into those responses, and I think it's really appreciated by our submitters. And as they talk about it, it means that more people are prepared to come forward. So it's really helping the public engage with us. So it's working really well. So thanks everybody for the improvements around that. So we'll just move up the resolution now that the council notes the outcomes of public presentations and one petition. What we're actually going to do in that is we're going to slightly change the wording, just a minute, to actually say what those permit. So what we're going to do is it's going to read, oh, you've got it up there, great, thank you very much. I hope everyone can see that. And that is so that the public, when they read the minutes, can see easily what actually happened and who went there. And I think we have to remember that these minutes are going to be read by the public. I'm always surprised at who reads our minutes and what level of detail they take an interest in. So thank you very much, Christina, for doing that. I'll call for somebody to move that up. Who would like to be the mover? Councillor Southworth is going to move. And what about a seconder? Someone like to second that? Seconded by Councillor Craig Pauling. Seconded by Councillor Craig Pauling. I'm sure everybody's in favour. So anybody who's against that resolution, please raise your hand. There being nobody raising their hand, I'll declare that as carried. Thank you very much, and thank you again, CE and staff. We're moving on now to item 8.2. You'll find this on page 25 of your agenda, and Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie will be speaking to this with the and also Councillor Ian Mackenzie.
Yep, thank you. This is a climate emergency update for the 17th of March. So flooding is a major issue for our river communities, and the science is showing that flooding frequency and intensity is increased due to climate change. The most recent climate change risk analysis shows that river and surface flooding is a major climatic risk for Canterbury and presents a high risk to both rural and urban communities. So in this update, we're just going to cover our flood resilience program. And so I'm going to hand over to Councillor Ian Mackenzie, who's got more specialist knowledge on this program. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. As Liz has introduced, flooding is a major issue for our communities. And that's not only for private assets such as homes and land, but it's also for public assets such as communications, roads and bridges, which allows our communities to stay connected. And as Liz has said, the science has shown that flood frequency and intensity are increasing due to climate change. In December, ECAN signed a contract with MBIE, Ministry for Business, Industry and Enterprise, to deliver $24.2 million worth of river resilience projects to support COVID-19 recovery under the Resilient River Communities Programme, a nationwide program to reduce environmental, economic and social damage caused by flooding and provide stimulation to local economies and social wellbeing. The funding for the projects is a co-investment between central and local government. So we as ECAN, on behalf of our ratepayers, are paying 36% of the cost of these projects, and central government is paying 64% of the total costs. There are 6 projects in the Climate Resilience Program of flood risk management projects, which sit within the river program here at ECAN. 2 have been recently completed, Macintosh's Bend and Waiau Township, and the other 4 have been worked on, which is the Horswell Weed Barrier, Rangitata Flood Recovery, which is well into its implementation, a program of region-wide planting and berm transition in our rivers from one end of Canterbury to the other, and vegetation and a specific project of vegetation clearance on the Ashley Rakahuri. The Macintosh's Bend project, which is down near the mouth of the Waimakariri River near Kapoi, was completed in October 21, and I've been out there and it looks really good. The only hiccup was that the new loos that were built locked a fisherman in there for several hours until someone could release him. We have since fixed that problem. And the Waiau Township Stop Bank project on the Waiau Ufa, on the confluence of the Waiau Ufa and Mason Rivers in North Canterbury, the project saw the remediation and strengthening of 2 existing stop banks and the construction of a new stop bank. And again, I was up there last week, and the River Liaison Committee up there is really happy with the project and the state of the stop banks, which have been regrassed. And because it's been such a good spring for establishing vegetation, those new stop banks are completely covered in grass already, which is really exciting for their resilience. And that new stop bank, it will give the township protection for a 1 in 200 year size flood event. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie and Councillor, 2 Councillor Mackenzies. And thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Ian. That was a really good way to cover that report. I am keen for that resolution to actually receive the update on climate, environment, Canterbury climate change. I think in future we'll have a look at actually explaining in that. This time I might just add the words, if I could have an amendment of that, move an amendment, climate change work centring around flooding resilience throughout Waitaha. I just think it's really important. Okay, full stop. So it just says it'll flow on. So climate change work centering around flooding. So I'll move that as amendment. Who would like to second that? Have I got a seconder? Yes, Councillor.
Liz has seconded it.
Oh, Liz, yeah, Councillor Mackenzie, Elizabeth seconded it. Just speaking to that, I think that, you know, like I've already said today, it is about community understanding, and the blander we get these minutes, the less anybody is going to be interested in reading them. And I think it's important for us to be saying what we are doing in climate change emergency work, and that's actually evolving in the climate change discussion arena around what is it we're actually doing. And we did have a comment earlier this week, and I can't remember which forum it was in, or maybe it was in Councillor Only Time. I think it was made by Councillor Clearwater around going to a community board and really raising the issue around how much people in the general population are interested in hearing what we're doing about climate change. And particularly that is growing. If you read the newspaper, the public media certainly is talking about that, and we have various surveys which are telling us that the public is becoming increasingly interested to hear from particularly regional councils about what we are doing in this space. And of course, climate change resilience and flooding is probably our most critical issue. And as the Councillor Mackenzies will both tell you, probably the thing that we're going to face most in this climate change emergency. So, Elizabeth, would you like to say something as the seconder?
Oh yes, yeah. I absolutely support both providing a bit more transparency for the public in terms of our minutes, but also yes, I agree. Flooding is probably our major climate change risk for this region. Thank you.
All right. Councillor Phil Clearwater, would you like to speak?
Oh, thank you, Jenny. Mine is in relation to in relation to the Waiau Stop Bank project, and it's great that these are being these protections are being put into place. But I noted the Councillor Ian Mackenzie described the protection as being a 1 in 200 year event size. And and as it's written, I guess just in terms of how people might perceive it, there is clearly the difference which Councillor Mackenzie, I guess, emphasised that in fact, it does not, just because it's a 1 in 200 year event plan in terms of the expected protection. We certainly know, and I'm hoping that the public know, that it doesn't mean it'll hold up without being flooded for 200 years. I'm really stressing the urgency of it, and I'm glad that Councillor Mackenzie referred to that.
Yes, Councillor, that's a good point. Councillor Mackenzie, would you like to speak some more to that?
Well, just to make it clear that the I accept everything that Phil said, but the 1 in 200 year event is actually linked to a certain river flow, and so if you want, it's a question of what aspect of flood risk is best understood by the public. And I accept that whatever term we use, there's probably going to be a degree of misinterpretation, but it'll be linked to a certain QMAC flow in Waiau and Mason rivers as to what that 1 in 200 year flood event looks like.
Yes, thank you very much. All right, well, look, I'd like to put this amendment first. We are treating it as amendment first, I think, Christina, or are we just treating it as one resolution? Can you just give me, oh no, we've got it as an amendment. So the amendment is moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie. If there's anybody against that amendment, please raise your hand electronically. I don't see anybody against, so that is carried. So now I'll put the formal resolution, which now reads, receives the update on the Canterbury Environment Canterbury's climate change work centring around flood resilience throughout Waitaha. I'll move that, and I'll take it that you'll second that, Elizabeth. Seconded by Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie. Once again, all those in favour or all those against, please raise your hand electronically. There being nobody raising their hand electronically, I'll declare that carried. Thank you all very much, and thank you very much to the staff who are working behind the scenes to prepare these reports. It's a very good way to daylight that work that we're doing around the COVID-19 flood recovery, because a lot of people will be checking how we're getting on with those, not only the people that live in those areas, but other people who are generally interested in what happened to the flood, the COVID recovery funding. So it's really good, and congratulations to all the staff for keeping those projects on track. It's fabulous work. Moving on to 8.9, the Greater Christchurch Partnership. We've got some minutes here on page 28, and Councillor Clearwater is going to move those minutes. I'm just wondering if you'd like to, we'll see if there's, first of all, we'll see if there's any questions about those minutes. Is there any questions anybody wants to raise about Greater Christchurch Partnership minutes? Yes, Elizabeth. Councillor Mackenzie.
Yes, could someone just explain why the minutes are so brief? They sort of don't seem to cover very much.
Maybe Councillor Clearwater.
So, Elizabeth, the actual formal meeting was very brief, and most of the work was done in the workshop, and that related to work related to developing an investment plan for Greater Christchurch, and I think councillors have already received informally an update on that matter. And that was the major matter, actually, which was worked through at the workshop. So the reason that the minutes are very brief is because the meeting was indeed brief.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clearwater. There being no other questions, I'll take it that you are moving this up, and seconded by myself as the other person present. Would you like to speak to it, the minutes, at all, anymore or not?
No, I think that's all I need to say in relation to the minutes, Jenny.
Yeah, I think it probably is. Once again, if I'll put it to the meeting, please put your hand up if you're opposed to this resolution. I don't see anybody opposed to it. I'll declare that carried. Thank you very much, everybody. now we're up to the excellent work we've done here, with ably assisted by staff who do once again a fantastic job around submissions. We're on page 31. This is the submission improving our environmental reporting systems. And just to start out with, I'd like to ask our staff member Olivia Cook to say a few words, and then if anybody's got any questions they can talk to Olivia, and then I know that Councillor Scott is going to speak to it and move the resolution. So if you go first, Olivia, that'd be good.
Good morning, councillors and Tumu Taiao. So this paper today is seeking approval of a draft submission to the Ministry for the Environment, and that's on the consultation document improving Aotearoa New Zealand's environmental reporting system te whakawhanaki I te punaha Tumu Taiao o Aotearoa. And really all I wanted to say was that while this consultation is proposing changes to a national, or proposing changes to the Environmental Reporting Act, and that's a piece of legislation that governs national reporting, the thing that sort of struck staff as they read this consultation document is that there's potentially very significant implications for local government functions and roles with respect to environmental reporting at a regional scale. And so while the submissions are supportive of many of the proposals in it, particularly around strengthening recognition of the treaty and incorporating Te Ao Māori and Mataranga Māori, we have identified that there are concerns with, I guess, the potential cost and resource implications for councils. And so that's featured heavily in the submission. We've also taken the opportunity just to highlight that there are broader issues that the ministry really needs to address, and these include sort of systemic issues with environmental reporting generally. So things like the fact that we don't have a coordinated strategy to direct national priorities, and just concerns with the ongoing number of proposals out for consultation, which are really limiting not just local authorities, but also mana whenua and other stakeholders' ability to respond. So really that was all I wanted to say about the submission, and I'll just hand back to you, Chair.
It'd be a good idea if I put my microphone on. Were there any other comments or questions? Elizabeth, have you got a question or a comment for Olivia?
Oh, apologies. I was going to speak in support of accepting the submission, so I'll just wait until... Oh,
that's all right. Well, maybe...
actually, I do have one question.
One question. Okay, do that.
Yes. And let me just get to my notes. Just a question of clarification, and it's around... on page 46, point 58, where it says, while there may be other central government agencies, for example, Department of Conservation and CRIs, for example, Land Care Research, who carry out research, contribute knowledge, data and information central to environmental reporting, these should not be specified in the Act. If these matters need to be clarified, the appropriate place to do so is through changes to regulations and standards prepared under the relevant principal acts. Could you just explain the rationale behind saying that? I wasn't very clear on it.
Sure. I guess there's two major reasons for that. One is that this is an act that's only directing the responsibilities and roles of the Minister for the Environment and the government statistician. And we've always advocated that if you want to set out sort of more detailed operational matters, you shouldn't do that in the Act. You should do it through regulations and standards, because it's much easier to update those. And in this instance, it might be that there might be changes to other acts like the Conservation Act that you might want to do changes to a regulation or a standard. So it's not saying it's not appropriate to make changes, just don't do it through the Environmental Reporting Act. Use a different mechanism.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Olivia. Very clear explanation. Councillor Lan Farm.
Kia ora. Thanks, Olivia, and thanks, Chair. I was just going to move and make a comment, if that's okay.
Yes, and Councillor Scott, I think, was going to... is that all right with you, Councillor Scott? Do you want to second it?
Yeah, go ahead, Lan. Go ahead.
You move it. You move it, Councillor Lan, and you speak to it now.
Thanks. Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say what a great submission it was. And I think it's great that we're pointing out, the pressures of all these types of submission requests that are coming from central government. I think the points we're making about better integration with central government in the various environmental reporting roles and responsibilities is really good. And I think particularly I just want to praise us in terms of offering a lot of value in even reframing the submission questions, particularly the one about Te Ao Māori. I think that's the kind of the reframing of these kind of things is so important. And so I really appreciate the thought and effort that staff have put into this. So thanks so much to Olivia and team, and happy to move.
Right, thank you, Councillor Farn. Councillor Scott, you're seconding it. Would you like to speak to it?
Substantially, my thunder has been taken from me, Jenny, on this matter by Lan, but I must admit that it is a good submission, and again, Olivia has, has delivered well for us. In terms of the introduction, the preamble, I mean, points 5, 6, and 7 to me hit home pretty hard in terms of, the things that Olivia's already mentioned about cost and, the matter of fact is that short time periods for these sorts of submissions and a depth of understanding across the country in terms of councils to respond to these things is pretty tough. And this is, to me, it seems a substantial sort of a thing. And I'm just wondering whether the implications of this are that they're going to drift some of this reporting into some sort of separate entity. So, again, does it tear away with what we're doing? But a great submission, and I'm happy to second it, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor McKenzie, would you like to speak?
Yes, I just wanted to speak in support of this. This is a really good submission. I read it and sort of couldn't find anything wrong with it. I thought it was great. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of areas that I thought were particularly good. The Mataranga Maori area and sort of enabling that research. For example, Mahinga Kai requires a program of environmental toxicology, for example, something we don't have in place. And I think the submission, while it didn't specifically refer to that, basically did say, we need a lot more resources in this area. And I think also in terms of just spelling out that the profit-driven competitive model is really not working for us at the moment. The other great section was talking about the interconnectedness, having a holistic, looking at the environment in a holistic, as an interconnected way. And also finally, suggesting that we could have key themes or values such as climate change, biodiversity and ecosystems, landscape character, these more sort of natural systems rather than having everything divided up as it currently is. So I just want to say, Olivia, really, really, really good submission. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor McKenzie. Would anybody else like to speak to this resolution? All right, well, I'll just say a couple of words. I think I endorse what everybody else has said, but surely, the main centre of this is we are in a crisis environmentally, and reporting has to inform it. So it's obviously when we go to the select committee, it's going to have to be, you get such a short time there, we're going to need some really good advice around how to present before the select committee. So this is is this going to a select committee? Yeah, I suppose it is. Anyway, I thought it was excellent too, so good work. We'll put the resolution. Once again, I imagine everybody's in support of this resolution. There it is up on the screen. We're approving this submission and we're delegating authority to the CE to make any minor changes. Moved by Councillor Lan Farn, seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. If anybody is against this resolution, please raise your hand electronically. I don't see any hands going up. That's carried. Thank you very much, and thank you sincerely for the work on that. We're moving on to 8.5 on the agenda, which is on page 54. Now, this is the submission around Taumata Arowai, and we'll ask one of our directors, Tim Davey, to come to the table. And if you'd just like to give us a bit of an overview of this, Tim, that'd be excellent. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa, kia ora, Chair Huey, thank you. So this paper is a submission to Taumata Arowai, where they're seeking feedback on 7 documents. The 7 documents are around standards, rules, acceptable solutions and performance measures. Taumata Arowai, of course, is the new regulator of drinking water, and drinking water is not directly in our sphere, but it is something that we have an interest in as part of the local government sector, and also in some of our regulatory powers, and that's some of the things that are discussed in the submission. The submission is, because of the nature of the papers themselves that are being requested for submissions on, they're necessarily technical, and in preparing our submission, we have actually only answered the questions directly within our ambit. Some of them are more for territorial authorities and other authorities to discuss, and we haven't put those in our submission. Overall, we support the intent to lift performance of drinking water supplies to allow for safe water every day, and that's an important part of what Taumata Arowai are trying to achieve, and we have supported that. The submission itself, unfortunately, was on a very short time frame. Councillors were sent a draft on March the 7th for comment, and then we've worked through the co-chairs of the Natural Environment Committee to finalise that, and thank you to Councillor Mihi and Councillor Pauling for that. Just finally, I want to thank the staff who prepared this, particularly Anita, Alistair Pickin, Paul Hopwood, Helen Shaw and Carl Hansen have been directly involved in the writing of the submission. So thank you to them and happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Tim. Have we got any questions? Councillor Lan Farm.
Kia ora, thank you, Tim. And yeah, another great submission. I just have a question, especially picking up on the sort of discrepancy between some of the drinking water rules and regulation, the rules in the Taumata Arowai Bill and some other form of legislation, maybe the MPS or something. And it was just a general question about whether there is a place within central government, and I'm not sure if you'd know because it's central government, not local government, but where there are checks and balances for actually ensuring that legislation makes sense. You know, like what is there an avenue to do that? I mean, is it up to us making submissions to point out these things, or what's the backstop if there is one, if you know?
I suspect I'm not the best person to answer a question like that, Councillor Farm. I'm just wondering if Catherine Shackey is online and might be able to answer that.
I could give you my answer, but we'll wait for Catherine.
Yes, Catherine. Sorry, Catherine, to throw. Did you want the question repeated, Catherine?
I think it was about the checks and balances on the central government agencies. And Lan, I'm sorry, I'm not much help to you. I'm hoping the chair might be able to contribute there.
There are checks and balances built into every one of these in the process with the drafters. In my experience, often it's only through submissions that have been where things have been pointed out that issues get changed. So it's really, really valuable. And do you know that politically, the select committee process, we're one of the only places in the Westminster system that has this. So it really does help the drafters and the legislative, the makers of the law, which are the elected MPs, but then it helps the drafters secondly. And they go back to the relevant departments and contact the people who've made the submissions. So in my 40 odd years of trying to do change both here and in Australia around pieces of legislation, there are checks and balances, but sometimes things go wrong because drafters are under huge pressure. And especially at the moment, if we're under pressure making submissions, imagine what pressure there is in central government for drafters. There's only so many of them. And, there's a Crown Law, whatever it's called, Crown Law has a look at all of this. But, so it's a very good question, Lan, and it's a really good one to keep an eye out for because invariably things get through that then I found out that are wrong. And it's really good having people like Catherine here working with us in our sphere and all the staff who regularly do these submissions because they're right to point out issues. And this whole, I think this era of change, just if I can be a bit more political in my views here about what's happening with both the water regulator and all the other changes in our sphere, we are in danger of finding out that there isn't proper connectedness. So I think the working groups that are with the minister, like the one that Stephanie's on with the RMA, and the ones that are on around the future of local government and all those other pieces of legislation that are flying around in there, those committees play a huge role through our staff helping to pick this up in that process. So the drafters love all that stuff because they get better instructions. So that's just my view about it. So it's a really, really good question and we need to keep an eye out for it. Humans are only humans, of course, I suppose. Councillor Clearwater, would you like to... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Hughie, if I could just as a final comment, just to say that in terms of this submission here, these are proposal documents. They're not sort of final pieces of legislation. So it is part of an ongoing discussion for this submission, but thank you.
Yeah, and that's often where it goes more wrong, in my view. Thank you very much, Tim. But it's just my view. Councillor Clearwater, you're next.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Tim. And Tim, I flagged one question to you. I've got another question which I'll just run past you first. It's in relation to on page 65 and point 48, which is around agreeing with the proposed phasing of the measures over a 3-year period. And just for clarification for me, I just wondered, does that mean, I'm just hoping that in fact the suppliers in fact would have a heads up 3 years in advance of what those future measures were going to be, rather than perhaps them changing every 3 years. I guess what I'm really asking, is it possible that this means that in fact there will still be clear directions to the suppliers in advance, I guess?
I apologise. I'm just reading it as we speak. What I'm going to do is I'll just check with any other staff member online who was involved in the actual writing of that. I think, as I read it, this is about giving clear warning and working through that rather than as a gradual change every 3 years. But I'll just check. Is that Helen?
It's Helen. It's Helen here.
Yeah, Helen Shaw.
Yes, as I understand it, the parameters of the reporting requirements are laid out, but they're done so in in 2022 you'll be required to report this, and then by 2023 it's that. So the idea is that there is warning provided, but that they're recognising that it may take some time to get systems and monitoring underway to sort of deliver on that reporting. So they're phasing it. But yeah, my understanding is that it will be clear what you're required to do.
In advance, yeah, great. Yeah. Well, thanks, Helen. I just hope that was the intention, and thank you for explaining that process. My other question, if I may, is on page 60, and it's paragraph 16. And Tim, I flagged that to you, and I think it's really around, I guess, my suggestion that paragraph be stronger. And I think you have some words available, and the staff, the secretaries may have that too, just to firm that up so that it's a clear indication.
Yeah, we can get that up on the screen for periods now.
It's there now. That's cool. And
Yeah.
thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Councillor Clearwater. And yes, we looked at that this morning and realised that it is a sort of a slightly, it's not loose wording, but it kind of has a pejorative element in it, and we've tried to take that out. So what we're proposing is that we're changing it to say, to agree that yes, the monitoring set out in Section 10.2 should indicate changes in source water quality, and then in the last sentence, given that water quality can change throughout the year, an initial year of a quarterly sample is needed to establish. It's just making it a bit more definite in what we're recommending. So this is around the, it's about looking for changes in water quality. So the ability of the drinking water provider to be able to see whether things have changed during the time. And what we're saying is that the monitoring that's set out should indicate that change. We agree with that, but we are saying that they need to have a baseline and to establish, they need to establish a baseline understanding before starting the monitoring so they can see that change. So if you're comfortable, then we're comfortable. We're proposing this change.
Yeah, and I'm very comfortable with those changes. It just firms it up and makes it clearer for me as the reader too, Tim. So thank you for that.
Okay.
All right, so that's really good. So we'll just park that amendment for a minute, Councillor Clearwater, just till we deal with these other questions, and we'll see if there's any other amendments, then we'll come back to them. So Councillor John Sunkel, you're next.
Thank you. Councillor Farn really asked my question, and just a challenge for me of what appears varying silos within central government looking to propose different solutions to the same problem which we have clearly identified. So I will say no more.
Yeah, and I will also say there is public sector reform going on, which is particularly looking at those silos. So hopefully we'll get rid of the silos one day. They came about halfway through my career and they're really bad news. So that's what happens when you cut out half the people in the public service, but we'll move on from that. Councillor Scott, you next.
Yeah, hi, Tim, and we touched on this earlier, but just that point under 71, and I'm taking it as having read again, Tim, that this is a statement saying we have roles here, and it's critical that they're identified and put in place so that everybody understands what those roles are, rather than anything else, rather than any other implications. Is that correct?
Yes, through you, Chair, that is correct. It's really saying that it is important to have that clarity, and I think what we're really thinking about is that a lot of this has come about through things like the Havelock North incident, and there was a lack of clarity from that around who was responsible for what, and we're saying that we need to have that clarity. So I think there's a good level of clarity as it's set out now around who has what responsibility, but once you get down to the finer detail, we just need to be absolutely clear who does what.
Look, I think that's a point well made in this discussion in terms of Three Waters, Taumata, Arowai and other things. We've always been pretty clear what our role is, as well, councillors have anyway. But general public have got no idea, actually. In some cases, it's just, we're tossed in that bucket with everybody else in terms of our political stance and misread sometimes. So I welcome that. I think that's good.
You're on mute, Chair.
Oh, golly, I am getting sick of this machine. Thank you, Councillor Scott, and thank you, Tim. I'll repeat what I said. And Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie, you're next.
Yeah, so I felt that this was actually a really important submission. And although I will support the submission, I actually felt that this was important enough that we probably should have had a workshop scheduled for it. I appreciate there's time constraints, but I just sort of felt that way. So I've just got a bit of a concern in relation to small-scale water systems, and hopefully you'll be able to address it, Tim. because I didn't sort of get the detail on this. Some people may argue that it's out of scope, but in fact, in terms of climate change, adaptation and resilience, people will increasingly need to collect and treat water on site for their own supply and for sometimes more than one domestic supply. And so I guess my concern is that I worry that acceptable solutions might tend to be based around the treatment technology rather than the quality of the water actually exiting the system. And that this could lead to over-commoditisation of water treatment systems, which would benefit business, but could actually disempower people in communities. And I also worry that innovation could be stifled if specific technologies are sort of, put in acts and things. And so I guess I just would like to know your perspective on this. I realise there's not a lot of detail in the submission about it, but yeah, would appreciate to hear from you on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKenzie, and through the chair. This is a difficult one for us as a regional council, because once you're starting to talk about water supply coming through things like rainwater tanks and it is outside our remit, but I do understand your concern, given that we have responsibilities around climate change and some of these other things that could be driving people towards this. So we haven't put it in the submission here because we thought, well, that's really a supply issue that is not part of our responsibility. And I probably couldn't say a lot more about that, but I take your point. I think that what we have tried to do in the submission is say we are in favour of driving towards good quality drinking water for all people in New Zealand. And I guess that one of the difficulties is once you start getting into the detail of that, how much is that kind of gold standard put above some of these things that you've discussed about? Does it just require technological fix rather than some of the other things that might be needed as well? So we haven't included in the submission because it's not something that we would feel, particularly around that drinking water source from rainwater and storage of collection of rainwater. Yeah, I'll probably leave it at that. I'm not sure that I've answered the question directly.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Tim. I guess I'm hoping that we will there will be some more consultation on this in future, and that we can actually have a good workshop and delve into this in a bit more depth. But I'm happy with the current submission as it is. But yeah, it was just more around that innovation was not sort of being I've sort of seen some acts stifling innovation. Air quality is a good example, simply by saying, well, it must be measured by a particular technology, and that very quickly goes out of date. So yeah, but thank you.
And certainly these are discussion documents, and we would expect further input into it later on. So yes.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I've been talking to Stephanie particularly about the issues raised in items 71, clauses 71 to 74. So maybe Stephanie's going to inform us now some more about what briefings we'll get in the future. So thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to to just do exactly that, and that is indicate that there will be multiple briefings, particularly given this picks up in 2023, and there's still significant work for Taumata Arowai and the entities to do over that period of time. Councillor Mackenzie, I wholeheartedly support that the council should be engaged in that, not just from our regulatory perspective, but in regard to the relationships with the TAs and others, but also in terms of keeping our communities safe. And I'm happy to take that away, Chair, to make sure that happens.
Oh, that's really excellent. Thanks very much, Stephanie, and thanks, Tim. Now we'll just go back to where we were with the amendment. If we could have that back up on the screen, that would be good. So what we have now, so there's nobody else wanting to comment, that's good, or ask a question. So there's no more amendments. So we have an amendment moved by Councillor Clearwater, I think, that we will substitute, we might substitute clause para 16 for the words on the screen that are going to be moved by Councillor Phil Clearwater, seconded by, is somebody going to second Phil's amendment here? Who would like to second it? Seconded by Councillor Southworth. All right, it's moved by Councillor Phil Clearwater and seconded by Councillor Southworth, and I think it's that we substitute the words, we'll just substitute this whole paragraph for paragraph 16. Would you like to speak to this, Councillor Phil Clearwater?
Look, I think it's self-explanatory, and Tim explained how this strengthens it too. So, but I would like to speak just to the whole report once this is once the amendment's been passed.
Right, thank you. So, do you want to speak, Councillor Southworth, or will you wait till the substantive motion?
No, it's fine. I'm happy with that amendment as it's proposed, and I think it's self-evident. Okay,
thanks very much. All right, I'll put that to the council that this amendment be accepted. Anybody who isn't in favour of that, please raise your hand electronically. There being nobody raising their hand, I'll declare that amendment carried. Now we're going to return to the substantive motion, which is going to read, approves the council's submission and then replaces clause and number 2 as around the minor changes to the CE, and we'll have a third, number 3 there. We're substituting this paragraph for paragraph 16. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. And I'll take that once again as the whole substantive motion. Are you happy to move the substantive motion as well, Councillor Clearwater?
I am indeed. Yes, I'll move the substantive motion.
And Councillor Southworth, you are happy to second the substantive motion?
Absolutely. Good with me.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Clearwater, would you like to speak to the resolution?
Look, I would, and thank you, Jenny, and big thank you to staff, because I was really impressed. I learned a huge amount actually from reading the technical parts of this report. It's for me as a councillor, it's helping put the Taumata Arowai part in its right place. And it just reminded me, though, of how complex the whole area is, and particularly, though, for the public and people to understand what is happening with Taumata Arowai. I just thought the report was really great. I think that the emphasis for our role as a regional council on protecting source water, that's loud and clear in there. And what we know about the importance of having accurate data, the best data too. I thought was very pleased that in fact the whole area of meeting acceptable MAV standards, the drinking water standards, that in fact that is something that we support. And so areas in our rural areas where there are high nitrate concentrations, that is of concern. And I'm pleased to see, though, there is going to be, and that staff have recommended testing for nitrates as a prerequisite to achieving good water standards. So yeah, I really commend the staff for an excellent report. I think it's been very helpful and it's a big step along the way.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clearwater, for raising that, and thank you to Tim, the staff, for their help with that. Would anybody else like to speak? Councillor Vicky, would you like to speak, or anybody else?
Yeah, no, I'd just like to say, these submissions are coming thick and fast, so well done to staff producing yet another high quality submission. And I'd also like to really say I was grateful to see the nitrates raised in there. The suite of testing that is proposed in the consultation documents really narrow, and nitrates seem like a major omission, particularly given that they aren't treated by the acceptable solution that's being put forward. And so I think that's a particularly valuable comment that we've made in our submission. So thank you for that.
All right, is anybody else wishing to speak? Please indicate. All right, well, I'll put the resolution once again to the meeting, and I'll take it that it's carried. If you are opposed to that change in the substantive resolution, please put up your hand electronically. Right, there's nobody getting their hands up. I do hope all the electronic hands are working. This would be terrible if they weren't, but I guess everybody would stick their hand up. So that's carried. Thank you very much to staff. Right, we're moving on here to number 9, which is the next meeting. The date of the next meeting is the 13th of April. Oh, did I say that was carried? I should say carried there, sorry. Number 10, we're up to the final Karakia, and are you going to carry this Karakia, Councillor Marshall?
Kia ora, just find my book, sorry.
Oh, hurry.
Inuhia, inuhia, inuhia ke te uru tapanui o tāne, kia wātia, kia mama, te nāko, te tinana, te wairua I te ara takata. Koiara e rongo whakairia ake ke runga, kia tina, tina. Homie, huie, taiki. Kia ora.
Thank you very much.